Let's see. Posts scheduled. Date is today. Hope this is going to go 11th, Friday the 11th, 8 p.m. Okay, yeah. The posts. I don't know. We have one person looking. I don't know if that is me or just some. Okay, we've got somebody coming. Once you come in, say hello to me in the chat. Let me open up in YouTube too. Let's see if anybody is coming in. Got two people. Okay, looking good. Smash that like up, like that like button. Shannon, how's it going? Sorry, Shannon. Or is it Shannon? Is it like Shan as in old? Let me see here now. Yes. Just wait for a few people to come in now. See if there's. Oh, we got 5, so they're starting to flood in. Yeah, Shannon. Okay, yeah. Yeah. So, what time is it now? 2:03. Well, if you've got 5 people in here, I'll start rambling. See if I have put aside a few things. Yeah, Shannon was the person who put me onto Patreon years ago, and I think I did set one up, and it was just like blank for years. And the only person that was on there giving me anything was Shannon, who was like, I think, signed up to give me $1 or something, and I had no level set up or nothing. And only like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I started to use it. So, and it was good because Patreon is good because it's good for me to make a bit of money to help me like be able to do the show, but also like the pressure of like knowing people are paying me money. I better get my fucking finger out and not do like an episode every 3 weeks or 2 months was I think my longest time. But yeah, so the man behind it is Shannon here. He's the man who's responsible for me getting a higher rate of productivity. So good man. Yeah, so got a good few topics here. I had like did I call this? Did I give this thing a name? What did I call this one? Did I call it anybody remember what did I call this one? The Social Democrats on the Fly? Is this what I call this stream? Yeah, the Sock Dem and the Lowly Fly. Something kind of like I've been thinking about during the week. It's something I touched upon last video a little bit about like the problem of entryism, and it's something I'm kind of hoping to set up. I talked about last week. Hope to set up some kind of a research project where we can get like empirical evidence of the success of this tactic that has been tried what seems like ad nauseum now for 50, 60 years. Yeah, and so like one of them, like it's hard enough, like it's hard enough to get into a hostile organism like say the Labour Party or the Democrats or whatever country you're in. It's hard enough to get inside these type of parties, which are really petty bourgeois parties. That's what they are. They have PR for left wing stuff, but in reality they're not. They're centrist parties, and specifically those involved in central office and specifically those in positions of power within the party are fundamentally opposed to a socialist thread in their own party, but also they're fundamentally opposed to the kind of self-emancipation of people. So, they look down on people as little people. We're the ones who knows how to do things. We're in charge. So you've got all of that institutional structure working against you. But like another fundamental thing, which I don't think people have talked about as much as they should, is that like the types of people who survive on the left in these parties. I call them the fly. Why am I calling them the fly? It's because it's kind of like the film. Like I can't remember. I think in the film, The Fly, where there was the. I saw the original one. I never saw the 80s remake, but like where they had like the man's head on the fly. He was like the fly buzzing around. But they also had like this tall guy with like a big fly's head on, and like what would he eat? Like, flies like to eat shit. Some of them do, quite a few of them do. They eat shit. Coprophagia. They eat shit. And for you to survive in a party like the Labour Party as a good socialist, you have to eat. They just give you plates and plates of shit every single time, every single day of your experience. And who can put up with that? Like, what kind of psychological makeup would you have to put up with that? To me, it's just it's inevitable. You're going to be a weak ass person like Jeremy Corbyn. Like people, I'm being pejorative here, but like I was moving some carpets and I got like a man with a van in London and just a normal run the mill fella. He'd done a couple of jobs for us. He's a nice guy, and I was riding in the van with him, and like we got talking to like sport and politics and stuff, and he was talking about Jeremy Corbyn, and like he was like, it's not a PC way of putting it, right? But he was just saying like, he doesn't have the balls for the job, and we can leave the non-PC stuff aside, but like in reality, like you have to play outwardly and positively against your own party structure. I just think that's inevitable. You can't play nice with these guys. Like after all the Jeremy Corbyn experiment and it's all done and dusted now, will there be any lasting institutional reforms that are of any meaning? And I really, really doubt it. Like if he had gone to one and done the selection where like the local people can or every year you have to like be reselected when you go forward for your for election in the next parliament. Like that is something that like literally radical local parties like Labour parties could get their people through, and they could kick out all the old people, and it would actually it would very much discipline the existing Labour Party parliamentarians. But like that was one thing that he could have done, but like that's not done with all the other things. Like I think the type of person you need to be. Watch what happens with AOC in these things, and watch how much shit they get forced to mop up and forced to back this stuff, and it just grinds you down. And like the type of people who survive in these organizations that any kind of entry thing can latch themselves onto are going to be fundamentally unfit for the job on average. You know, I watched one with Matt Christman, one of his live streams. I watched him another time, and he was talking about how the reason why he got behind Bernie was that, you know, Bernie was this guy, you know, and he didn't give a fuck, you know, and he was going to go in there and like knock down doors. And that's why I went for Bernie. This is only like 3 months ago or something, after it all fell apart. With hindsight, to still say that stuff like that Bernie was the man and he would have done it, is kind of madness. It's pure madness. So I think, you know, we got to keep hammering this issue. It's not purely the institutional thing that's going to hammer you, not purely the media and the state and all that. Okay, that's a fucking given. But it's also the type of people who can survive in these parties. You know, they're just, you know, they don't really exist. You know, you have all these people who are supposed to be Corbynites. Is it there's a red-haired guy, an MP, and he came out and basically was like following party line on the anti-Semitism report and stuff like that. Like, these are the type of people who are, you know, socialists in the Labour Party. They're just careerists. And the ones that aren't careerists are shit eaters. They're flies. Yeah, you're putting all your hope on shit-eating flies. Okay. Here we go. Let's see here. Robert O'Coin says, true, the NDP in Canada has the same dietary predilections. Seriously, we got to meme this. We got to meme this up. I'm not a meme person. You know, I photoshopping with capabilities are crap. Can't draw. Let's get somebody. But like, we should be memeing like the shit eating of the Social Democrats and entryism. Like, that should be memed. Like, I'm putting that down. I'm going to keep on this thing. I'm going to call them the fly and the shit eaters. And we should be spreading this because it's real. It's real. You know, who was there left in the Labour Party? You know, you had John McDonnell, who's supposed to be a trot, and he's like probably you know, calls himself a Marxist and stuff like that. And he was talking about, you know, Tony Blair, should he be put to the ICC for International Criminal Court for the invasion of Iraq? And he started talking about, Tony, let's not talk about that. Tony did great work in Northern Ireland. And you're like, you know, get fucked. Okay. Robert says, I think the lesson, if you want to commit to entryism, you have to have an appetite for purging your ideological opponents quickly and thoroughly. Yeah, like, honestly, I just think, you know, and we went through the whole revolutionary strategy thing, and I gave the entryism tactic as much room and as much like fair play and as much kind of balanced thought as I could. And I just think that it is not a strategy of any note. Even if you get in, if Corbyn got in and went Stalin on it, just like he was being accused of when of course he wasn't. And if he went and did the same thing as they are doing now in the Labour Party to the left, you know, I still don't think that. I just don't think they would succeed. I think you would have you are expending your energy on an internal battle where you're much more likely to lose with all the institutional outside things working against you versus the idea of building your own independent force. I look to, you know, I've said it a few times, looking to how Sinn Féin in Ireland have built up their party. they did not enter into Fianna Fáil to try and take Fianna Fáil over, which, you know, could have been a strategy. Fianna Fáil was the kind of party of power, kind of centre-right Irish party that was on the Republican side, on the anti-treaty side, so on the side that was revolutionary, that fought the Civil War against the treaty that was signed. You know, ideologically would have a predisposition to the Republican side versus, say, the other centre-right party, Fine Gael. So, like, they, you know, you could have had an entryist. You could easily have had an entryist campaign into, say, something like Fianna Fáil from a Republican point of view. But they set up their own party and they trenched it out, and they had independent thought, and they were able to use their power externally as opposed to internally. You know, you can only fight so many battles, and you will always be trying to accommodate your enemy within an organization like that. So I just think entryism as a tactic, I think, well, we want to do some of this empirical research, but I'm unaware of anywhere that it's been a success. Like, if somebody can show me where it's been a success, I'd be surprised. I'd be interested to hear. Let me see. It's lose-lose when you don't control the media. But look, Shannon, you can't say that that Sinn Féin in Ireland or in Northern Ireland had the media on their side. They categorically, to this day, anytime anything talks about the Republican movement, say in the South, Sinn Féin now, who are the dominant party, even though they're not in government, like, they just bring up the same old rubbish all the time. Like, maybe it's not to the same old talking points from like 40, 50 years ago. They talk about Jerry Adams' father molested his brothers or something like this. They'll talk about that woman who was shot in the Troubles, and she had a single mother with a load of kids, and she was shot and disappeared. There's a bank raid on Ulster Bank or something. There'll be 3 or 4 stories, and they just constantly hammer these all the time, are undeniably against them and negative, but they have created their own kind of media sphere. And in my day, it was just like the paper on Public on the street and stuff like that. So, I think, honestly, if we're looking to build an actually revolutionary socialist body, trying to get to actual socialism, not social democracy, or not market socialism, but to like a socialist communist future, it has to be built upon our own institutions. And this entryism stuff is just really, now we've had our evidence. It's a shortcut, and it's a shortcut. Look at the people who surround the media people who surround this, around the labor stuff. Say, let's take Aaron Bastani, say, for example, from Novara Media. He talks, I've heard him on Novara Media talking about, young entrepreneurs, Brexit's bad for them and stuff like this. It's just, the guy he actually calls himself a communist. And, what is the politics of these people? The politics for these people is, it's people who are radical in their youth, want to create a media job and want to keep radical, and then they get a bit older, they go to the right. How do you be a left com and then a social democrat and still call yourself a communist? It completely makes no sense. Let's see here. If Corbyn got in, he would have been Robin Cooked or John Smithed. Well, yeah, I don't think I'm not so hot on what the politics was of Robin Cook or John Smith or David Kelly. I would have thought that John Smith was not a left. I would have thought he was kind of like maybe not as far to the right as Tony Blair, but in that in the mold of Kinnock. But I don't know enough about that period. I just know from my youth. Yeah, you can't rule anything out. You can't rule anything out. You sound like a total. You sound like a complete conspiracy theorist when you talk about that kind of stuff. But you know, if I was a gambling man, I don't think David Kelly committed suicide. Let me put it that way. Entryism only works for the right because they're just less polite about the capitalist establishment already practice, but sometimes has to sometimes demur about. Well, like look at Trump when he came through, right? They know that Trump may say, for example, may have some different policies, just like not exactly Trump, but like a person like Trump. They know they might have different emphasis on trade or stuff like that, or tax regime or immigration or whatever. But they know they're not trying to like renegotiate stuff in favor of the working class. Yeah. So even though they're bombastic and stuff, they won't get attacked to the same extent, or they will get enteried by the mainstream Republicans equivalents or whatever Tories. They will get integrated into that thing, if they're not already, and it's just PR. And certainly, like you look at Trump, they estimated that he got something crazy, like $2 or $3 billion worth of free advertising by how much the media talked about him compared to other candidates. And they know that, like look how much they talked about Bernie, who, you could say he was like a departure from standard Democratic Party line, right? They gave him no media. And then you had Trump, who was a departure from standard Republican rhetoric, and they gave him loads. So you have, Trump is not like he was never going to be like anti-capitalist. Yeah, he might have had just different policy choices. So it's so it's not the same thing. There are structural differences between doing it from the left and doing it from the right. Okay, Senan says, Sinn Féin fluked it in a way. No big party will go into government with them, so they are untainted. Mary Lou wanted to go centre-right, but got wiped out in elections and was talked around to the left. I don't know the ins and outs of Mary Lou and what she wanted to do, but I will say that, I think what Mike McNair says on this is correct, is that, capital fucks up, right? The falling rate of profit and always means the pressure is on for pressure on profitability, causing people to get into speculation, boom and bust cycle. Capitalism will mess up. Okay, so if capitalism are going to mess up, what does that mean? That means that you have essentially a time where you build your forces, and when there is a crisis in the system, things move in a non-linear dynamic way. So it's not like the idea is those experiments where they have you're building up a pile of sand, and you go to have a little spout at the top, and it's just pouring sand onto a place, and the sand dune rises up, and it gets to a certain stage, and then all of a sudden it'll be just like 1 or 2 grains will hit, and then it will cause the dune to actually just shift and reallocate its structure. Okay, that you can't see it from that single grain. You can't say, oh, this grain is going to hit here now, and then that big dune of sand is just going to go boom, like a 5,000 ton sand dune is just going to go from one. But that's what happens in real life. You like in the Sahara and these places, just little bits of sand go onto them, and these massive things just totally shift and change their size. And that's what's happening in these things. That's what happens to these party systems, like whereby Sinn Féin had gone from six, like when I don't know what age you are, Shannon, but like when I was in college 20 years ago, 25 years ago, nearly 25 years ago, yeah, they were in the Republic. They didn't have one member of Parliament. They didn't have one Teachta Dála. So uh, they have since gone now. I think they have. Well, I'd have to check, but I think they have. They're the biggest party anyway. Do they have 45? But anyway, they're about. They went from there to about 12% in the 2008 crisis. They doubled, I think, from like 6% to 10-15%, and then they stayed there fairly statically, some movement up, some movement down, until the most recent general election, which was basically a lot of it was done on out of control rent prices, no social housing, the huge homelessness and a homelessness crisis, and also a health service that's been designed to be as inefficient and as badly run as and understaffed as they can, so that force people into the private to pay for private insurance. It's been that way since the 1980s. The last time my parents didn't have private health insurance was literally, I think, in Charlie Haughey's like 1982 government. That was the last time when he pumped a lot of money into the health service before it crashed in 86. So like let's have a look here for Sinn Féin and have a look for how many TDs they have. So they got 37. So that makes them the highest, the biggest party. But if they were rerun the election today, I think they're probably look like they would easily get 45 to 50. That's out of 160. So while they only got 37 seats, they only got less than a quarter seats. They actually got a bigger vote. But the problem was that they didn't have candidates running in all of the different places. If they had a candidate running in each place, they would have won in every constituency, and in a lot of constituencies they would have got two. Untainted by the austerity house crisis, yeah, absolutely. But like, that's the same. That's going to happen to a communist revolution thing. They're not going to say, oh well, they got into power in the last crash. Like we're building a party for towards a revolution, not towards taking part on and looking after the capitalist system. Let me see here now. What else do we have? Yeah, Grimlock says, I think is completely correct. Every single, like, if you go to look at South America, say, where they've had some, like, I'm not saying like all of these places, like, obviously I'm not saying Sinn Féin are revolutionary communists. I'm not saying that Chavez is, or the Workers' Party is in Brazil, or the one in Ecuador run by God, I forget his name now. He's been kicked out. Correa, or these ones, they didn't try and latch into existing parties. They built their own movements, and until the left gets actually serious about that, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change. To the extent that the Social Democrats will never get anywhere, because the Social Democrats only got somewhere when there was a radical, revolutionary, communist, socialist, anarchist, large force that caused the Social Democrats, the capitalist class, to negotiate with them. Okay, so if a Social Democrat ever gets anywhere, it'll only be because of the radicals. But our thing is to basically look at the abject failures of two Bernie runs. Not even one cabinet minister. Yeah, not one. Yeah, look at what'll happen in in the Labour Party, is there even one progressive left on the cabinet that hasn't thrown the left under the bus? I don't know. I don't follow it close enough. But let's see. Navarre media people are just angling for jobs at the Guardian. Yeah, like fundamentally, these are the people. Like I had a run-in with Owen Jones on Twitter, and I didn't tweet him or anything. I tweeted about him. I met him one night on the tube when I was just starting the podcast, and I had seen him give an introduction in Conway Hall to Tony Benn, and he gave Tony Benn such a kind of a big intro, like how he was a great friend of his, and he was like an amazing influence on his political career and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, wow, I didn't really know Owen Jones at the time, and I was just going to some anti-war thing, and I thought, oh, this Owen Jones guy, he looks like, he must be quite close to this Tony Benn guy. And I met him in the tube on the Central Line coming home when I was playing poker professionally, and I was coming home late at night, and he got on the thing, and he was drinking. He was after out, probably had 3 or 4 pints something, and his friend was there. I was standing near him, and I said, "Oh, you're Owen Jones?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, I'm doing the podcast." I said, "Oh, did you hear that Tony Benn died?" And he went, "Yeah." And I said, like, "Oh, you must have been, you must have been pretty upset or something." And he was like, he kind of gave me a kind of a strange look or something, and then I was like, okay, yeah. I said, you going to the funeral? And he was like, yeah, I don't know, or something. And like, I was quite shocked when I got home. I remember saying to my missus, going like, God, like some of these people, they're very fake. Like on stage, they give you this like thing, like there's these people, and it's just all this lovey-dovey crap that's like in Hollywood or anything. It's just a game. And like, yeah. So anyway, I think I said he looked at me like, I'm not going to the funeral, but he did kind of give me a strange look. It's just telling you how I saw it. And apparently he did go to the funeral, and somebody must have sent it to him, a tweet, and so he commented in and started making an idiot out of me, so I had to delete them all. But that story's fucking true. And it was very embarrassing, I must say. So beware your memories. Dear. Now, let's see. I'm trying to. So Senan saying John Smith was centre right, but danger from him was he was proposing a British constitution. I didn't know the WikiLeaks cables came out after Corbyn, but yeah, that's interesting. Okay, it wasn't WikiLeaks. Definitely remember this one talk somewhere. Yeah, it wasn't WikiLeaks. Yeah, I don't think it was WikiLeaks. Okay, now let me see. I had a couple of other topics here to talk about. We're on a half an hour already. Christ Almighty! Oh yeah, I was going to talk about, like, I've been watching some of those Matt Christman videos, and like these people, like they say they do say what they're about. Like in his talk ones. Matt Christman, like I think he's the only good one out of the Chapo people, to be honest with you. But he's the only one that's got anything interesting to say. But he was talking about, how, this movement, we have nothing. When we need a new movement, we got to that's going to do something about distribution, right? And when you hear people talk about distribution, they don't ever talk about like worker control. They don't ever talk about freedom. Socialist freedom, the decision at democracy at the very root of every single action. They don't talk about like your democracy in your workplace. They don't talk about any about that stuff. They talk about distribution at the point of consumption. Yeah, whereby you're going to get a little bit of a better share. Well, look what happened the last time you had your social democratic bargain. How long did it take for it to fall apart? It went from 1945 in America. I don't think you can even really count a New Deal. Maybe at a stretch you can count a New Deal, right? From 32. Let's give it to 32. 32 to Jimmy Carter in 76. Okay. So at the very outset, you got 45 years. till the rate of profit came in there. I think that's generous. In England, it was the post-war. It was 45 to Thatcher in, I think, 79. So that was like 34 years. Okay? And it's downhill since then. The Gini coefficient is gone. What these suckers want to sell you is in a point of crisis. If we ever get our left stuff working and out of reverse gear, if we ever get it out of reverse gear, what they'll try and sell us is to get the Gini coefficient back down to 29. Yeah, it's at 38 now. It's at 38. We'll get down to 29. Sorted for 35 years. We'll do good. We'll get a big media job. You know, why is it like that? A radical podcast like Chapel Trap House is the biggest one that gets all the views out there. There are a lot of good, more radical podcasts out there. You know, so I think, you know, we get the media, we get the left media. I'm going to say that we get the left media that capital wants. We have to create our own media external to these things. Okay. I think that's just fundamental. It has to be our own media, and we have to have our own organizations that aren't batshit, like, it's not difficult to come up with functioning organizations that are fundamentally democratic. It's not a hard thing to come up with the processes. It's all out there. Now, somebody asked me to talk about Yanis Varoufakis. Let me see what's going on in the chat here. Yeah. Well, Richard Wolff is a guy who really does know Marx. Like in that TSSI reading group series we did, like Richard Wolff has some actual work in there. He has a system that is essentially, you know, a Schraffian type system, and he's done some fundamental Marxist research. Richard Wolff is not a guy who doesn't know what he's doing. He's a guy who explicitly knows what he's doing, and is explicitly basically making a line for market socialism, you know. So that's Richard Wolff. And he is the only Marxist that gets onto anything in America that's even approaching mainstream. You know, he's not a revolutionary Marxist. I don't think he is. You know, I don't think his politics say that he is. Okay. Yanis Varoufakis. Yeah, somebody asked me about Yanis Varoufakis. Like, he's been on the show before, and I think in episode 13 or 14 years ago, talking about the Eurozone crisis. Like, Yanis is an interesting character. Like, he gave me his time when my podcast was like very small. But I suppose there wasn't too many weirdos reading his blogs back then. But he, you know, when he got offered a job for Syriza, he suddenly came out with this speech about how he is a Marxist. And I think anybody who believes him should send me, like, I'll tell you, anybody who believes Van Varoufakis when he says he's a Marxist, I'm actually a Nigerian prince, and you need to send me like 10 grand. And I got this sheets of black money that I got special ink, and I'll give you the formula for the ink, and I'll send you the sheets. And I just can't get the money out of Woolwich here. You know, if there's an embargo here in Woolwich, I can't get these. I can't get my Nigerian money out of Woolwich. That's all I'm going to say. He's not a Marxist. No more Marxist. None of his books are in the Marxist vein. They don't talk about the falling rate of profit. He's fundamentally a kind of Keynesian, post-Keynesian. That's his economics, and that's his politics. And, you know, that's the politics of Syriza. You know, most of the Marxists that economists that are out there are actually Keynesian economists. That's just the. I don't consider I'm a Marxist at all. I interviewed Helena Sheehan, and she wrote a book on Syriza. I think it was it the Syriza Wave? I think, and she was really critical of him. Like, she was saying that like a lot of the stuff that he's saying in public is not what went on privately. It's not what he did, and he did this thing where he would go into these meetings with all the European finance ministers and like show them the theory of like how debt repayment is not going to work if it's too much for your GDP, and as if Germany and the creditor nations in Europe don't know this stuff, as if they're just like, oh, thanks, Yanis. Oh God, we didn't know about that. Well, Jesus, you know what? We better go and change our policies. It's like, what kind of madness is that? They know exactly what they're doing. They know the game. All of the people know the game. Everybody knows the game when you're playing it at that level. So it's kind of this kind of liberal conceit in there whereby, it's hard to even understand how serious he was. Can he be that naive to think that like they don't know? I just think he was an advisor to the Papandreou Socialist Party in the mid 2000s. That's his politics. So I think it was kind of like some kind of ego career thing, as opposed to like any kind of a realistic thing. Can you imagine some like actual proper Marxist economist going in there and trying to think, oh, maybe I can explain to them value theory and then I'll get them on my side? It's a load of nonsense. Somebody asked me to talk about productive versus unproductive labor. All I can say about that is that it's a topic I don't know enough about, and I've been wanting to do some research on it. To be honest, it's a topic that I feel like I want to get a firmer grasp on. So that I don't want to talk about that yet. I might do an interview with somebody on that in the future. I'll put that down. That was Max. I'll try and do an interview on that, Max, in the next few months. Oh God, what else do we have here? Shannon was asking me about junior book mulligans. All right, I come from a very small town. I come from outside. I come from whereabouts are you from, Shannon, in the chat? The town I come from is called Athboy, and it's about 1,200 people if you include all the town's land. So you go about a 3-mile radius outside of and you count everybody living out in the country, and so the town is like 1,200 people. So like where I'm from is like, we consider ourselves a big town. Like that's like we're consider ourselves a big town. We're not a village, we're a big town. And we had a nightclub in our town, which was weird, like, because you would get sometimes like you could get 1,000 people going to the nightclub, and it was called like Buck Mulligan's. It was an ungodly crap place to go out. I really hated it, but it was the only place you could go like a late drink when I was a teenager. But there was always savagery there. There was always like just mayhem. Like I remember when I went to college first, my mother was saying to me, she would say like, now mind yourself when you're out at night and coming home. Really watch out now in Dublin. And like, I go to Dublin. I swear to God, in the 10 years I lived in Dublin, I never saw a fight. I swear to God, I don't know if I ever saw a fight in Dublin, hardly. When I used to go to Buck Mulligan's, it was like Beirut. It was like fucking Belfast in the 1970s. There was one fella, like, there was one poor fella got in a fight, right? And this tell you how bad the fights were. He was about 17, this guy, and he got in a fight with some people, and they broke his leg. Like, you know, it's quite hard to break someone's leg in a fight. Well, they broke this fella's leg. Anyway, the next week I saw this fella, and he was there. He came back. He went out to the nightclub again the next week. He was on crutches. And after like everybody get kicked out of the nightclub at the end of the night, that's when all the rows break out. I mean, there would be like just numerous rows all over the place. But then the fellas who bet the crap out of him this week, they saw him the week before. They saw him the next week, and he was standing by the post office, and he had like on his crutches. They took the crutches off him and broke his other leg. Right? That's just pure muck savagery, you know. Just like they broke his other leg, you know. My God. So that's my Buck Mulligan story. I've got some other classic stories from that, but I must do a Buck Mulligan's episode. I've got enough stories coming out of that fucking place. You're from a place called Bohermeen. Oh yeah. You went to Rathcarn. All right. So you went to I was driving around Rathcarn there. Rathcarn is a Gaeltacht area. After the Civil War of Independence, there was land redistribution, and they gave a lot of land near where I am, which is in the centre of the country, to people from the Gaeltacht areas, the Irish-speaking areas in the West Coast, who had nothing essentially, and they gave them some land, and they set up like a school and stuff out there, and they still speak Irish out there, and they have an Irish language school. So Shannon went there. That's interesting. Yeah, I know a few boys that went there. What is there another one here? Shannon asked me one about, Shannon asked me one about what can be done by leftists towards United Ireland. Well, I'll tell you the single most important thing that will be done to create United Ireland, and that's if the Irish health service becomes as good as the NHS in England. And until that's done, there won't be a United Ireland. Because if you've got some condition, you know, like my missus has a condition, and if we wanted to move to Ireland, it would be really, she'd be badly supported by it. You know, you'd have to pay private health insurance or go on the public, and the public system, you could be waiting a long time for see specialists. And the cost of drugs, you know. I think in the UK here or something is like £12.50. I can't remember what it is because I don't buy them. Precious buys them like £12.50 limit a month or something. You can max pay. You know, so if you're getting like £300 worth of drugs a month and you're paying £12.50, and then you go and move to Ireland and it's £300 a month, that's like €4,000 every year extra cost. You know, and that's like if you're God knows, you can imagine in Northern Ireland with the troubles and post-traumatic stress and all kind of madness going on there, how many people really rely on the NHS? You know, fellas with bad knees that are being kneecapped and all manner of stuff like that. You know, until they do that. So that'll be the number one reason why, like, as a leftist in Ireland, they should be probably supporting Sinn Féin, because they know when they get in, they are going to go Stalin on what is called the HSE in Ireland, which is like the health executive. And they're going to go Stalin on that. And they're going to, if they get in power, that's going to, I expect that'll be their prime focus, that and on housing. And I think, like, if they do that and there's a vote, I think that's the way you get a United Ireland. I don't think there's any hope of getting it without an NHS. Yeah, I have a book here. It's on sense of okay, sorry. Talk about Sorry, they're talking in the chat there about something. What else are we talking here? We got Senan asked me something about like the futility of left-right as a kind of a term. You know, French feudalistic seating arrangements as the fundamental basis for equating political conviction with the linear spatial metaphor. Well, yeah, you're right. You know, I think, like, in reality, how many dimensions are political dimensions? You know, people go for lack of hierarchy, they go equality, they go, you know, freedom, they go, you know, there's loads of, it's a multi-dimensional space. Yeah. And in reality, you're mapping a multi-dimensional space crudely onto a two-dimensional single point estimator, how far you are on a line. Okay. It reminds me of seven of my friends. We built this piece of software we used to call the horse curve, which was like a single point estimator to predict a horse would win, or would a horse win a race or not. And But like, yeah, you were taking all these dimensions, the horse's form, how big the horse was, all these different things, how long it was since this previously ran, all this kind of stuff, feed it in, and we just pointed out one number, and whichever had the highest number was the most likely to win. Like so it's like a number line, and that's what essentially the left-right thing is. It's taking a multi-dimensional space and mapping it to a line, and so it's obviously going to be crude. Yeah, I just think, like you're saying, and you also asked in there, like, how do you map anti-vaxxer, on that? I think that if you were to look at anti-vaxxing, like, I would think a lot of that would be, I would think, like, people's life experience, people's experience of healthcare. Like, I think certainly it's like women are much more, from the statistical evidence I've seen, are much more anti-vaxxer than men. But women's experience with the health service, with doctors and stuff, is way more negative than men. I know that from, like, Precious and and her friends, and things that the doctors have said, happened, done to them. Like, I think, procedures, like, there are so many female ailments that if it was a male ailment, like, things would be done about them. Things would be done about them. Like, what was that one about was it the male contraceptive pill that wasn't continued? And it was because, it made like men's skin a tendency to have a little bit of acne or something. Something as trivial as that. When you look at the side effects of female contraception, it's a load of nonsense. Yeah, so we got I think the big learning that we've learned from Corbyn and Sanders, and I think it's a thing that from a kind of a Marxist kind of dialectical, historical materialist kind of point of view, like, from reading the Brumaire, you see, like, how the how these bodies, historical movements and political movements move, and how sometimes they have to go through phases to get to the next phase. And I think, given our historical makeup, it's inevitable we would go through those phases. I feel like first, but I don't feel like there is any hope for entryism. I think it's a dead end. Okay, I think it's a dead end towards the end of capitalism. It's a complete dead end. So until, like, in places like America and France, wherever, Ireland, countries all over the world, until they get independent class power, movements and parties and organizational forms that are entirely independent, we're going to be stuck in things getting more unequal. Because you look at what the policies of the establishment left is, even after 2008 and even after COVID, they are still going to be Blairite and Obama-ite type and Clintonite type neoliberal policies. They have nothing to offer you, and they will never, ever offer us anything until there is an actual threat. But we don't want to be the threat for the next Social Democrats. We want to chew them up. Like, let's be honest. And it's the young people who are way more likely to do it than, middle-aged losers like me. Let's get that straight. So, anything else? Whatever. Have I ever spoken in depth about his poker playing days? Gambling and radical politics. That's a good one, Michael. I would say there is very little intersection between them two. What I would say, what works from poker playing is that, like, poker players, like, you have your simple mathematical probability stuff that you do for, like, understanding your odds here. I have I've got 25% equity at this point. What should I do? You have that stuff. But like on a higher level, well, you also have game. Well, two other things I'm going to deal with here. We have the idea of game theory and balance. So, which was not a style I really played. I played an exploitative style, but like you have this idea of balance where you have optimal game theoretical optimal strategies whereby you are balanced in such a way as to maximize your expectancy no matter what happens. Okay. And so like with respect to like left politics, I think that there's definitely understanding the need for balance in our political strategies. So I mean, say balance in a way whereby we have to be able to say, I'm going to make up something, but like, let's say, show a certain amount of aggression and a certain amount of ability to not aggress in such a way as to maximize our forces in a particular area. I think like I don't know if I'm explaining it very well right now. And let me come back to the balance one, and I'll think about it. But it's a good idea to talk about. But the other one is this idea of like a Bayesian statistical approach. Okay, so whereby you're getting very limited information in about, say, the person that you are opposite, and you have to make this idea not you have to try and come up with a probability assessment of the person's intention, not just the probability of you might win, but also the probability that person is bluffing or not bluffing. Okay, on very limited data. And like, I've said it a few times in the podcast before, is that you can't be cynical enough, right? And one thing I think I find with people who are, I don't know if it's just left-wingers, that's maybe wrong, but a lot of people like to see the best in other people. But like, that's not how you should approach any problem when it comes to like power, money, or anything like that. Like, you should be approaching it as in the like, if what are their motivations? Can they be doing it cynically? If they are cynical, you should assume the person is cynical and game that out, and also then assume they're not cynical and look at the two approaches, and your strategy versus those two different approaches, the cynical and the not cynical approach. Like your strategy should be balanced with respect to them, so you should be able to deal with both. Like all the time when Corbyn was in there, and I used to see Keir Starmer in there, I just knew to say that I'm not surprised by what's going on now would be the greatest understatement I've ever made. It was so obvious. And what I was actually confused with when Corbyn came to power with certain politicians, particularly like somebody like Chuka Ummah. I don't know if people know him. The Americans might know. He was like a front bencher for Labour, and he was very smooth, kind of Blairite guy, very smooth. I would have thought a very good Blairite kind of operator type. And he basically just kind of lost the plot and just threw his toys out of his pram because of the Corbyn stuff. But like, the smart man was Keir Starmer, who went and just totally went and tried to look like he was back in Jeremy Corbyn, but at the same time undermining him internally, and then telling everybody in the election thing, like, I am the candidate, I am all for socialism, and I'm for allowing the left and the right of the party to come together. And then when he gets in, the fist comes in. It's so predictable, so goddamn predictable, So I think the idea of being able to infer a person's intentions or coming up with probabilities for the intentions. And I must make this clear, like when I first started when I used to play with my mates playing poker, I used to be able to read them all so well. I used to win every time I play against them. And then when I went to the poker club first and I started playing, I was much more doing the numbers because I was thinking like, oh, these people are probably really good, so I'm going to have to like not be able to rely on my reading as much. And then I started realizing that like, I think I'm able to read these guys. And I started making these kind of outrageous calls on people. And I would be right a lot. Like, if you're right 60-40, you're making a lot of money. But if you're right like 75-25, you're making a lot of money in these scenarios. And I would say on my reads and stuff like that were very strong, like 75% correct, I'd say, something like that. So yeah, so that's like understanding that like you have to try and get into the other person's mindset on small amounts of information. And so not just other singular person, but other party formations and their strategies, and understand the likelihood of what they're going to do. I think like game theoretical, like the amount of game theory that's being played by entryism is that much. Zero game theory. Like if you go on Twitter, you see people, I can't believe it. They said this thing about anti-Semitism over here, but yet now they're kicking out Jewish people out of the Labour Party. Like, what's going on? Like, and you're like going, they kicked out that guy. Like, was there an old Jewish guy when Tony Blair was doing like the Labour Party conference, and he was an old guy and he stand up and he gave out, and they got this old like 85-year-old guy, and they got the bouncers out, and they just fucked him out the door when the Iraq war vote was going on. Like these people do not care. They don't care about it. So it's like, yeah. Let's see what else is here. Now, someone get Tom and his entourage to Vegas. I was in Vegas once, but I only stayed there one night. I was on a road trip, and I hardly got to play any poker. So yeah. Right, I'm going to head off now. Thanks everybody in the chat. That's over an hour. It's hard doing these on your own, but it's good when you get the chat bumping like today. I'm going to do another one of these next week, and I have a good few interviews lined up, and I have some ones in the bank to go. I'm doing one on this book with Greg Belvedere, who was on before talking about John Michael Greer. We're doing one on this one, The Reactionary Mind by Corey Robin, which is actually, it's a pretty damn good book. I think it's really good, to be honest with you. And oh yeah, the winners, we have now got, that's our next reading group, Understanding Class. I am dreading it because it's analytical Marxism, and the writing style is not my favorite. What's wrong with Marxists? God damn it, they write badly usually. So I'm going to have to read that over the Christmas, and I have about 100 other things I'm doing as well. I have also got some MMA. I've got an MMA socialist podcast interview with another podcast. That's a two-parter coming up, hopefully next week. So we've got a load of stuff on the way. And right, I love yous and leave yous, and talk to yous next week. Oh, what do I do here? Am I hitting the end button? There we go. End.